difficult, intimate relationship that you're in with a boyfriend, girlfriend, mother, whoever it is, somebody in which you're saying to yourself, these are people who are supposed to love me, and I'm putting up with this crap. That relationship is just a mirror of how you're loving yourself inside. So everybody has problems possibly at Thanksgiving with their loved ones. Everybody has issues that I'm going to go over here around the holidays. Gift giving, communicating, feeling judgment and rejection, feeling responsible for fixing others, things like that, trying to make sure everyone's happy. It's just that when you're neurodivergent, you're much more prone to feeling that strongly, much more intensely. The holidays become much, much more of a headache, possibly even very emotional to the point where you even get depressed or get really anxious. You might even have to take anxiety medication just to deal with your relatives. So this is what it's like to be neurodivergent. Yep. Yes, we can all use some help around the holidays, whether you're neurodivergent or not. But I think these principles and the meditation that's here is designed to help everybody. But we did want to target people in which, they're really having a hard time. We're talking about people who need medication. One second. One of my friends says that she has to take medication when she's out because just the anxieties are so strong. Some people don't even want to go to Thanksgiving celebrations because of the anxiety around it and dealing with relatives and it's all these emotions that they have a hard time processing. And so, um, this is what this is for. And so, and then we're going to do a meditation around that. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, I went onto ChatGPT and I searched for what are the top 5 typical issues people search for solutions when spending the holidays with relatives. What are these top 5 typical issues? And I'm going to show you how the Resolve protocol and the principle of emotional resolution of somatic emotion release meditations help with this. This one, meditational tool and the emotion shifting principles in it that I do in the meditations can help with these things. But I'm going to just go over the list. I asked for the top 5, and this is what it gave me. So the top 5 things that people with neurodivergence typically search for and seek help with during the holidays are recurring conflict and emotional triggers. Holidays often bring back into close contact with family members who were part of their childhood environment, sometimes the origin of unresolved trauma or emotional programming. And so this can often trigger old patterns such as blame, obligation, guilt, emotion, or even fights, arguments, emotional outbursts, right? Um, inability to communicate effectively. Many experience a breakdown in communication with relatives. So, when there's occurring conflict and emotional triggers, you get so emotional, you can't speak right. You want to communicate more calmly, but you're scared that it's either going to turn into a yelling match or you're just going to be overwhelmed, so you don't even try. So some people get into arguments and some people just become quiet and they don't really have a good time during the holidays. So inability to communicate effectively. They can't say what they really want to say in a way that they could be heard and in a way that's honestly respectful and not about getting into a fight. It's just about setting boundaries, maybe. Number 3, fear of judgment and rejection, which can, again, trigger these emotional triggers, right? See how all these things are connected together? So this is number 3, fear of judgment and rejection. Usually feel unsafe around the family due to fear of being criticized, misunderstood, having their life choices invalidated. I don't know if my mom's not going to be watching this, I don't think. But my mom's the type of mom that, she'll just bring up the awkward, blunt comment about your marriage or about your money situation or about your job in front of everyone. And, excuse me, sorry about this. Um, and she will just sort of say it in front of everyone. And so there's that fear of judgment and rejection. And if your mother is like that, sometimes people just don't want to attend, period, altogether. So that fear of judgment and rejection, or, say you're unemployed, and so you're just scared of all those questions. How is the job doing? Or say, honestly, your kid has some kind of behavioral problem or something like that. And then you hear, how's your son doing? Or something like that. And on top of that, you hear how everyone else is like, my son's doing great. I got a promotion at my job. And then you just sort of want to cower away, right? Because you're just used to people asking certain questions like that. Or honestly, you're just also tired of the old, everybody avoids any kind of topics and they just talk like these kinds of pleasantries. How was the drive over? Things like that. And it's just really uncomfortable for everybody. Number four is feeling responsible for fixing others. So there's some people in which, especially if you have it at your house. I know my ex, she spent like at least half of a party or half of a vacation making sure that everybody was happy. When I say everybody, I mean like everybody was happy. And trying to make sure that everybody was having a good time, especially when there was relatives over, like her mother or her father or something like that. You really tried to make sure that, and she felt personally responsible for whatever kind of mood that they were in. So feeling responsible, and that was just a big emotional drag and heaviness for her, but she couldn't stop herself. Um, and then we're not even talking about people who have addiction issues, mental illness. Maybe, honestly, this is the time of the year where you watch your loved one, maybe with a drinking problem, drink too much, and you want to control them, and you feel responsible if they start acting embarrassing or something like that. Excuse me one second. Sorry about this. Oh, my allergies. I don't know why they're popping up right now. Excuse me. Um, but there's a tendency to feel responsible for managing the other person's behavior, so Um, and then the last one is just the internal conflict, So all of this stuff, recurring conflict and emotional triggers, inability to communicate effectively during the holidays, fear of judgment and rejection over the holidays, feeling responsible for fixing others over the holidays. All of this, you might even be thinking about all of this before you even get there. You can be thinking about this weeks in advance. So number five is, one of the most sought after searches for help during the holidays for people is the internal conflict. You know, what do I do? I'm thinking about all this stuff. I want better connection, but I'm dreading the entire experience. I just like the whole thing to be different. All right. So these are the top five search for topics. And I also looked at the top five hot button issues that people search for solutions for. This is like the whole, I'm going to bring up politics again. I know my uncle is going to bring up politics. I know they're going to bring up my boyfriend or something like that. I know they're going to bring up what happened during the election or something like that. And I don't want to have to deal with it. So we'll talk about that as well. But I wanted to talk about how all of these five top searched issues that people would look for solutions for during the holidays. Imagine, though, I said this last time. Imagine you still had these issues inside you. You were still thinking about them. You even experienced them. But imagine that your emotions around them are like 90% less, 80% less. So instead of the strong 100% anxiety that gets you tongue-tied, you have the 10% of that anxiety. You have 15% of that anxiety. You're still having the issue happening in front of you, or you're still having the thought. But imagine your anxiety over this, your tension over this is like 90% less. Imagine yourself walking into your mom's house, your grandmom's house, whoever's hosting the Thanksgiving event that you're nervous about, that you're dreading, but you're just not feeling all that anxiety, all that dread. It's like 80 to 90% less. Is it a problem now? So notice how if we take away the great majority of the heavy emotion around it, is it a problem? And and honestly, if you're asking, well, what would I be feeling if I'm not feeling anxiety, uh, depression, dread? What would I be feeling? What if you were feeling peace? What if you were feeling honestly nothing? Not emotionally dead or in shock or numb. You were just feeling this peaceful nothingness. And you checked inside, and maybe there's a blip of anxiety, a blip of dread, but that's it. Again, All of the thoughts, all of the issues still exist, but the emotions are 90% less. And ask yourself, from that perspective, is there a problem? Is there a problem? Recurring conflict, emotional triggers. I guess the emotional trigger wouldn't be there. Inability to communicate effectively. A lot of times, the inability to communicate effectively is greatly affected by nervousness, by anxiety. You get tongue-tied. So imagine you were calm. Imagine that you didn't need to raise your voice. Imagine that you weren't scared of getting tongue-tied because you're just calm. So you could talk about possibly an issue, but you could do it as calmly as asking for the potatoes or asking for more gravy, you know. So imagine that. That would help with that, wouldn't it? Fear of judgment and rejection. Again, that's an emotion. What if you knew your uncle who judged you for your gay marriage? What if you knew your grandfather who rejected your political stance and who you're voting for was still there, but the fear of the judgment and the rejection was 90% less? It was only 10% of what it was, 15% of what it was. Even if it was 50, 60% of 40 to 50% of what it was. So it's like at least 50% gone. Wouldn't that be an improvement? And so without the intensity of the fear of judgment and rejection, is it really a problem? Is it really a problem? I mean, ask yourself that, because this is really all about the emotions, feeling responsible for fixing others. That's usually the people pleasing thing, right? This is the thing where, oh, great, my mom's going to get mad because she wants to be the one to make the turkey, but then my aunt comes in and da 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 da, and then they start getting mad at each other. And so I have to be the one to go in there and make sure that mom's happy, my aunt's happy, this da 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 da. And they come complaining to me. Now you feel responsible for fixing others. You have this people pleasing kind of thing. You can't say no. And not only that, you've done this for so long, they expect it. They expect, so they even start talking to you that way. Tell your aunt that I don't like her rice dish. Tell your aunt that I don't like her dessert or something like that. I mean, this sounds like a comedy, but this can happen, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to a Filipino Thanksgiving, but they're a hoot. Anyway, so um, feeling responsible for fixing others. This is guilt because the whole idea is if I don't do this, I'm going to feel guilty. They're going to make me feel ashamed. That's that look that my mother gives me when she's disapproving. I mean, I remember inviting, my mother to the house, and she doesn't even have to say anything about how clean or not clean she thinks your house is. Have you ever had that? So she doesn't actually say anything. She'll just look around like this, like that. Then I just sort of roll my eyes, turn down the lights so nobody could see, if there's dust on the floor or something like that. And so what if, though, all of that guilt and shame, again, was, at least 50% less or up to 90% less. So you're only feeling 10% of the guilt and shame that drives people pleasing, that drives, procrastinating, that drives the need to fix others and be the peacemaker and all that stuff. All the family roles come out here, right? This is all driven by emotion. And again, when your emotions are that intense, especially when you have neurodivergent emotions, especially if you've been traumatized by certain kinds of interactions with relatives and stuff, neurodivergent people are much more likely to be traumatized because we're so emotionally sensitive, right? And then we just end up unleashing our neurodivergent, coping systems on each other and get each other mad and stuff. So we start dreading this stuff before it even happens, right? Which is why, again, some people just rather not go. Or worse, honestly, they start drinking a lot. They start, I have to take like 15 milligrams of a marijuana gummy before I even go in there. And then you end up like blitzed out on the couch and stuff. So this is what internal conflict does. You think about taking drugs or alcohol before you even go. But what if the conflict inside, the emotional stuff, is greatly reduced? Again, 50 to 90% reduced. See how all of these five things change starts from a huge problem to, is it a problem when you take the emotional intensity out of it? And I'm not trying to say you don't have any emotions. You're not trying to say you don't have emotions. They're just not as strong. They're just not as intense. That's what somatic release does. That's what these somatic release meditations do. And I know that these things are effective because as a coach, I work with families during the holidays, especially, in which there is multiple addiction, mental health issues, and drinking, possible drug use, arguments abound, people feeling like they don't even want to go. Holidays for people, families dealing with addiction are a nightmare. And I've learned, I've worked with families dealing with addiction ever since I was a drug and alcohol counselor 20 years ago. And I'll be honest, I've learned to not say, how are your holidays doing? Happy, great, feeling great during the holidays? I've learned not to say that to families and people dealing with addiction because the holidays are not great, especially when you have these intense emotional dysregulation and emotional behavior control problems, right? So what I'm saying is I've worked with families doing this somatic release work, and they tell me it is amazing. After you did that with me for like 2 or 3 sessions, like 2 hours a session, I was able to go in there. My daughter's acting her usual way, and I am not overreacting. I'm talking to her. I'm addressing things. It's not that I'm staying silent and not saying anything, but I'm addressing her in a calm way. I'm not acting nervous. I'm just acting very calm. It's amazing because the nerves, the anxiety just doesn't come up. This is what somatic energy release does. So let's go to, I am paying attention to the clock. Let's go to the other search that I did. This is a search based on what are the top 5 hot button topics people search for solutions for when spending the holidays with relatives. These are the topics of conversation that people like to avoid. Number 1, political and ideological differences. You know, relatives with differing worldviews in close proximity, any kind of conversations around politics, religion, social justice, current events. These are things that you just want to avoid. But then isn't there always that relative who just won't shut up about it? They'll just say it straight out. If they might start out with, I heard on TV today, or I heard that you guys, you liberals or you conservatives did this. And you just can't keep quiet about it and stuff. And you know that they talk like that. So that's the number one hot button topic is, of course, especially during the last year with what's been happening in this country, political and ideological differences. I have a feeling there are probably families not spending time together during the holidays as a result of this. They've chosen already. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to go because he's there. And I've heard of things like this where adult daughters refuse to be with their father, um, sons refuse to be with their mother. I mean, your own children, your own adult children do not want to be with you. So this can be really damaging, to have a Thanksgiving in which you don't want to be with your family because of that reason. Other hot button topics, parenting criticism, unsolicited advice. Yes, I really felt when we finally had a child, I realized this is the one topic where everybody felt they had a right to tell you what to do when they talked about parenting. And all they had to do was see what you were doing with your child and stuff. And so, you know, they would just say, yeah, she's crying because you're spoiling her. That's the one that we always got. So parenting criticism, unsolicited advice. Again, you don't want to hear that. And this is the other one, number 3, unresolved family roles. You know, mom always got into a fight with my sister, and therefore I felt like the one that had to come between them, make the peace. They separate, and sometimes you even feel that you're the one who has to communicate between them. You never liked this role, but you fell into it because all you wanted was just peace when everybody was together. So you have these unresolved family roles. and dynamics around that, black sheep, golden child, I'm the one that sits in the corner because everybody's ashamed of me, or I'm the one dealing with addiction or something like that. And that's the other one is another searched for hot button topic around the holidays is dealing with addiction, mental health, or relatives who are just constantly inappropriate. You ever have a relative like every hour they say something blunt, rude, inappropriate, talking about things like divorce to your face, talking about things like, you know, you lost a lot of money and how did that go to your face? Um, or when you had some kind of angry, upset explosion at your child and the other day, and they'll just bring it up in a very inappropriate manner and stuff, problem relatives like that. I'll be honest, my mom says something like that like once an hour. And so like you spend a whole 8 hours, you're gonna hear it like 8 to 10 times and stuff. Um, and then just the other hot button topic is boundaries around time, space, expectations. A lot of times, my I'm divorced. So our daughter, who's coming back from college, she's 19. She's going to have to do this whole how long am I staying with each parent? You know, um, um, we're going to have to split that up. She's a freshman in college. She lives now 3 states away. You know, um, we don't get her for 1 week with the mother and 1 week with the father. Stuff we get her for, we have to split the time. And so expectations about that. Who hosts? Um, and the gift giving, how much to participate, how long are we going to stay here because we have other relatives to go to, and it's going to make my mom feel guilty and all of this stuff. People feel guilt tripped, shamed. You never see me enough. Fine, we barely see you, or you're so close, and why don't we see you enough? And they don't realize, like, because you're so toxic. So again, so all of these issues that I just talked about here, this happens probably to a lot of families, maybe every family. Maybe 80% of families are like this. When you have strong enough generational trauma and neurodivergence that you can easily end up with a diagnosis, ADHD, autism, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, PTSD, not because you have anxiety, because your anxiety is so severe, not because you have depression, because your depression is so severe, not because you're impulsive once in a while, it's because your impulsivity is off the charts. That's when you end up with these kinds of diagnoses, when it becomes a problem, right? So all of these issues everyone experiences. It's just that neurodivergent audiences, in which this channel is for, we experience these things. It feels like 5 to 10 times more intense and regular than everybody else. And we're just talking about you and one other person at the table. What if there's like 5 or 6 of you like this, yelling conversations back and forth and getting to arguments back and forth like this? And then everybody thinks it's normal, because this is the way we've always talked. I tell you, it was like that in a Filipino household. And so imagine though, so what this somatic release protocol does is it releases immediately and effectively and lastingly any kind of unresolved trauma that was never resolved in the past. It this resolves a lot of it as long as you're willing to dig deep, feel your emotions, put your mental thinking and logical system of security to the side, all of your defensiveness, and simply somatically experience your trapped, unresolved emotions, even trauma-based emotions. That's what somatic emotional energy release does, which is what these meditations do. It greatly deflates the emotional intensity around all of these things. So imagine going into Thanksgiving and you have your belligerent, blunt, rude, know-it-all sounding kind of uncle who has a total ideological differences about your gay marriage or something, or just around how you voted compared to how he voted. And they're going to talk. Like, they're going to talk. We just usually put up with it. So just dreading that, right? would make you want to take anxiety medication or make you want to like go to the bar a lot and grab a lot more beers than usual or something like that. Or just, take a marijuana gummy before you go in there and just go in there blitzed and stuff so you just don't have to deal with it. But when you do somatic energy release, imagine all of your nervousness and tension around your uncle is like 90% less. So he's throwing out all of these insult bombs at you, you liberals that, gay marriage this or transgender that. I don't understand, you people. You usually end up being called you people. It's like they forget your name. You people this and you people that. But imagine that it's really inside in your heart. It's not landing anywhere. Like usually what happens inside, something inside seizes up, right? And takes it personally. That's what it means to take things personally. Someone says something and you immediately get emotional. Something inside seizes up. Imagine you don't take it personally. Imagine that his insults don't land anywhere. That's the best way to describe it. So someone is asked here, what is somatic energy release exactly? It is a way of resolving those core unresolved emotions that a lot of us carry around lots of times from our pasts, and I'll be honest, lots of times from our traumatic past. And it's a way of gently, peacefully as you can, resolving it. And you release these unresolved core emotions of shame, of low self-esteem, of unresolved fear that you had around something in the past, around unresolved grief, unresolved hopeless despair. These are all things that you might experience in a trauma or in a difficult childhood experience, right? But the emotions, when you don't resolve them, they get trapped in the body. And then they actually, as you're growing up, they help to form your personality. Your whole personality is formed around not feeling this stuff, right? So what we've learned here at Light Minds is a way to release all that. When I say release, I just did it just earlier today with a mother dealing with alcoholism, addiction, and her husband and the son. And she released things, and I know when I work with somebody that they've released it because when they come to me with a problem, they're almost in tears. Their faces are like really tight and they're almost wincing from the anxiety around it. And then when I'm done working with them and they have this somatic energy release, they look totally calm. Their eyes look bigger. Their whole, what starts out tight in their cheeks, their whole cheeks and their face relax, their shoulders go down. It's like, I'll be honest, it looks like they went to Woodstock and got high. They just look really, really calm. Some people actually even look like they're like just really, really calm like that. And that's when I know they've shifted. They've had a somatic energy release. You can see it in the way they carry their body after the session. But I don't just notice that during the session and say goodbye. I follow up with a lot of the clients that I do this with days later, weeks later, months later, sometimes years later. Because when you do a somatic energy release and you release unresolved trauma, unresolved core emotions, what we find is it's gone. It's gone forever. Around that topic. Around that topic, it's gone forever. Around the topic of dealing with your mom pushing your guilt buttons, around dealing with your shame over your grades or something like that. Like it's gone around that topic. And it just doesn't come back because I check up on clients like that. And I check up on clients in which they're doing this work with me under severe, severe conditions, abusive, alcoholic husbands, sons dealing with massive drug addiction and the anxiety that comes out of that, that they're able to talk to their loved ones in a calmer manner continuously. And people will say, after I had that session with you, everything changed. So this is not any kind of voodoo mystical stuff. It's really, really simple. Emotions All emotions are resolved when they're felt and fully experienced in the body. Period. That's it. So that's why emotions like peace, love, happiness, and joy, we have no problems embracing those and feeling those in the body. And that's why lots of times people tell me, my happiness, I feel it and it's fleeting. Peace is fleeting. Yeah, because when you feel a little bit of peace, you embrace it, and when whatever you embrace into the system, it's gone. The body, think of, emotions are energy. That's it. Scientific energy. So what happens when energy goes through a body of water? It peaks, it goes up, and it goes down. Same thing in the human body. An emotion needs to peak, even if it's anxiety, even if it's low self-esteem, even if it's grief and loss, even if it's a sense of hopeless despair. It just needs to peak and go down. And if you're scared about this, oh, I don't want to look at that. Two things about this. We always cushion it with this presence of meditative peace that we've learned and taught people to bring up very easily. This is the kind of peace you might feel after an hour of meditation, after doing yoga for a while, or in nature. Maybe you felt this, or in deep prayer. People who meditate can feel this, but it takes a long time for them to feel it. We can help you access it in like 2 minutes. And not only access it, help you to feel enhanced. So you feel not only do you access this presence of peace, it feels really enhanced in the body. Then we bring out the troubling emotion. That helps it to peak in the body. You feel it fully, and then it goes down. And the other important part is you don't go with the mind. The only thing that's going to trip this whole somatic energy release thing up is doing anything cognitive, doing anything where you're thinking about it, anything where you're analyzing it, anything where you're, you know, trying to create some kind of psychological categorical system around it. Just put your mind to the side, bring up the peace, let your body feel it, and it goes down. And depending on how deep you go and how much is brought out, a lot of times people report months later, I don't have this anxiety anymore about my drug addicted son coming to visit me all the time, or my narcissistic alcoholic husband insulting me. I just I just feel peace around it. It's amazing. So imagine all of these topics around that these hot button topics that people search for solutions for, especially in a neurodivergent population when you're in relationships, political and ideological differences, parenting criticism, unsolicited advice, unresolved family roles and old dynamics, problematic relatives or relatives with addiction and mental health issues, any kind of things, boundaries around time, space, and expectations. Imagine that they all exist still, but you're not feeling uptight about it. You're not feeling inside maybe 10% of the anxiety that you usually feel about it when your uncle's talking about his political point of view and criticizing yours. When somebody criticizes you about your parenting, about your schooling, about your financial situation, you're just not feeling as defensive inside, and it's gone like a good 50 to 90%. You know, the unresolved family roles, how many times do we do things out of guilt, shame, fear, the need to bring peace to the situation because you just want to feel peace and you don't want to feel any of the icky feelings. So you do all these things and jump over backwards and jump through hoops for people, in your people pleasing behaviors because you just don't want to feel the guilt. You don't want to feel the shame. You don't want to feel bad during the holidays. What if you go in there and your ability to feel like crap, guilt, shame, bad, your ability to feel anxiety is like 50 to 90% less. And you're not doing this because you're constantly saying, just give them a break. Don't argue. You're not telling yourself anything because when you walk in there, you just don't feel the emotion, period. That's what it's like. And you're not walking in there like a zombie. You're not walking in there like you have no, you're walking in there like some kind of, you've been through one flew over the cuckoo's nest and you've had a lobotomy. You're not walking in there like that. You're you, but your emotions are like 50 to 90% reduced. So it's you, but softer. You, but less hard-edged. You, but less reactive. That's what it's like. So all of these issues that we just mentioned here, with the emotions greatly reduced, Are they a problem? Ask yourself that. Imagine that. That the dynamic, the whole thing is still the same. The whole situation, the insulting uncle, the mother dynamic, you burning the potatoes and walking in with them. But any kind of guilt, shame, manipulation, anxiety, despair you'd normally feel that would make you run for a drink, you're just not feeling it. And and what are you feeling? You're feeling some emotion, but you're generally feeling like much, much, much more peaceful. Now, I'm not trying to say that nothing would get to you. You'd feel some emotions. Like, my mother is the kind of person that if you spend 4 days with her, once an hour, she will say something blunt, rude, invasive, confrontational in a very blunt, rude, critical way and not even realize she's doing it. So she'll do it like once an hour. So I'd say like 1 out of 10 to 15 times, I had to set a boundary. Like, Mom, you already asked me this like 5 times already. Or I told you not to talk about the thing. Well, why are you talking about it now? But I'll say it like that. I won't say it like I won't call her names. I won't yell at her. I won't snap at her. It's just, I'll just set a boundary around it. She may not understand. She may still get mad. That's fine. She does. But the point is, there's no anxiety around it. Is it a problem? So this kind of stuff, it baffles the mind. Neurodivergent people, understandably, I do this a lot too. We need to overly rely on our logical system to get us out of jams, emotional jams, because our emotions are too strong. And we tamp the emotions down with our logical system, with the way we think about things. But for neurodivergent people, our emotions are way too strong. They're really, really strong compared to the average person. So, you might not see it in yourself, but maybe you can see it in your relative where they're making an emotional decision. Have you ever seen this where they're making an emotional decision, but they're using a logical reason to make it? Well, I just had to quit that job because I don't believe in my boss. He's contributing to capitalism and he's not giving us good dental benefits. Didn't you say that about your last 5 jobs that you quit? Are you sure you're not making a decision out of, overwhelming anxiety? We can't admit to that because we're so ashamed of that. We'll just, no, all of my bosses were jerks. Well, you're never going to have a perfect boss. That was an exact speech that my sister gave me after I was quitting jobs like every 6 months, not realizing that was the reason why. We have these, we are just really reliant, understandably again, on our systems of logic to tamp down our nerve-wracking, intense emotions. But the problem is they don't work too well if the emotions are too strong. And the systems of logic that we use are sort of ridiculous. People can sort of see through it, but we don't. We just then nestle into our position even more and say, no, I quit the last 5 jobs because every single boss was a jerk. I can prove it. I took notes, stuff like that. Right. So, no, we, we do this because we're scared of our own emotions. We're scared of our emotions. That's really what it comes down to. We're scared of our emotions. And it's understandable that we're scared of our emotions because whatever negative or difficult emotions you never resolved, they just build up in the system and becomes trauma. That's what happens. Unresolved emotions, starting with your childhood, shame, guilt, low self-esteem, fear, loss. If you don't resolve them when they happen and they start building up like that, they become trauma. And trauma is basically holding all of those unresolved emotions from those experiences in the body. And so under the slightest trigger, your ego now inflates it from like Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde inside. Sometimes it comes out, or sometimes it just stays in and you start drinking or something like that. That's what unresolved trauma and unresolved core emotions do. They build up in the system, and then when they're triggered in a different kind of conversation, it all comes out. So I could tell you that in arguments with my ex, I could intellectually clearly see that she's not my mother. Clearly. If you said that, I'd be like, of course, I could see she's not my mother. She's not even Filipino. What do you think? I'm an idiot? I would probably tell you that. But then if you ask me, why are you yelling at her and getting mad at her like she's your mother? It's because even though my intellect could understand it, my emotional nervous system couldn't. My emotional nervous system because it never resolved these things, could not tell the difference between what was happening in front of me and what happened to me 35 years ago. And so therefore we would get into a fight. And sometimes I would even say, this is just like my mother. This reminds me of this. This is just like I was when I was raised in my house. And I'll be honest with you, whatever you don't resolve in your childhood, mother making you feel guilty, feeling attacked all the time, um, feeling anger and you never got to resolve it, you'll just repeat that in your relationships. And so sometimes I deal with young people interacting with difficult parents. And what I tell them is learn to do this protocol and resolve these emotions so you can set better boundaries with your parents. Do not put up with a needy parent who's guilting you, who's emotionally manipulating you, who's trying to trigger you, push your buttons of shame and guilt. Learn to resolve, do this somatic release protocol to learn to resolve it and take responsibility for it. And just don't be one of those adult kids as you grow up that just rolls your eyes. That's my mother guilting me again, manipulating me again. You don't say anything. A lot of times people don't do anything because they don't know what to do. But once you learn this protocol, I told my daughter when I taught it to her, if you have to set a boundary with mom, set a boundary. Don't, and you got to keep setting it too, because the mind is a big habit. She'll keep on going back to the old patterns of being emotionally needy until you redirect her behavior over and over and over again and stuff. And I said, but you need to do that. Don't put up with it. Why? Because your mind will get used to it. And then you're going to treat your own partner that way, or you're going to treat your own kid that way. Because your mind will say then, well, that's the way I was treated. That's the way it was in my house. And you will just repeat it, thinking that's just the way it is. And then when you get a divorce or when your kid stops talking to you, you won't even know what hit you. And so, because this is what happens. Any kind of unresolved stuff like this, we just bring it into the next relationship. You get the same old messages. Everyone that I work with, I do this kind of this is not advanced coaching, but it's very difficult for clients to hear this. Whatever kind of intimate relationship that you're in with a boyfriend, with a girlfriend, with a parent, something in which this person is supposed to be loving you, something in which, yeah, this person is supposed to be family and therefore they're supposed to love you, but they're treating you terribly. They're not respecting you. They're guilting you. They're making you feel shame. They're emotionally manipulating you. That is just a mirror of how you love yourself. And so when someone says to me now, my wife does this to me, my wife does that to me, really what's happening is, but when I say like, well, why don't you just do this? Well, I love them. I love her. Well, honestly, what's happening is you putting up with this kind of abusive relationship in which you say this is a love relationship is actually a mirror of how you love yourself. Your partner is just mirroring to you what you think of yourself inside. I wouldn't call that advanced coaching, but that's the kind of coaching that's really hard to hear. But I try to force the client to take responsibility for themselves. If you're putting up with something over and over again for years and just complaining to people about it, and if it's supposed to be one of the major family, intimate love relationships of your life, it's just a mirror of what you think of yourself. Because usually when people say, then why don't you do something about it? People usually say, well, I love them. No, this is a mirror of actually how you're loving yourself. That means you're loving yourself and hating yourself at the same time. And your partner is just mirroring that. So in a way, you have to take responsibility for it. If you have unresolved guilt that they keep on manipulating with you, with unresolved low self-esteem that they keep on trying to make you feel bad, once I teach you this protocol tonight, and there's over 30 videos in my YouTube channel that do things like this, and you do it over and over and over again until you learn to use this tool automatically and learn to hollow out and clean out any kind of unresolved emotions in there, you you can never be in that kind of relationship again because you'll be personally responsible for resolving your own emotions and stuff. So just remember this. Any difficult, intimate relationship that you're in with a boyfriend, girlfriend, mother, whoever it is, somebody in which you're saying to yourself, these are people who are supposed to love me, and I'm putting up with this crap. That relationship is just a mirror of how you're loving yourself inside. It's only, or another way you can say it is God is telling you this is what you need to work on inside. Your low self-esteem, your guilt, your shame, your unresolved sense of grief. Whatever they're triggering you in you, that's what the universe or God is saying. This is what I need you to resolve. And I'm going to keep on having this person bring this up in you until you resolve it. And it's going to get worse until you do, because God really needs you to resolve it. That's another way to look at this. Okay. So this tool, this somatic releasing tool, is designed for that. There are other things like it. Somatic release Reiki. I think I would, anything that's somatic, there's somatic yoga. I would even say acupuncture might be in there. Anything where it's about just paying attention to the feelings in your body. There is such a thing as somatic therapy. I would call this uh, somatic coaching practice, somatic coaching practice. That's what I would call this because I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach, but the technique is the same. Okay, so um, that's what this does, and it teaches you to take responsibility for your emotions. After you get this down, honestly, you should never be in a situation where someone's guilting you or manipulating you or obligating you, because the only way they know how to do that is if you have an unresolved emotion that they keep on hitting, they keep on pushing. Once you learn how to resolve this, it doesn't matter if they try to push it. You'll either not feel it because you've resolved it using this protocol, or you know what to do. If you feel it, you take responsibility for it. And you can say, you're not going to be allowed to do this again because I'm going to take responsibility for it. That's it. Nor will you be able to do that to somebody else. So not only will you not be in a relationship in which somebody's doing that to you, you will not be doing that to someone else either. Because the only reason you're manipulating, obligating them, trying to make them feel bad and guilty for doing something to you is because you don't know how to resolve your emotions. You don't know how to resolve your hurt core emotions. Narcissists have this problem. Really, what it comes down to, a narcissist, no matter how old they are, no matter how big they are, it comes down to a little hurt child inside who doesn't know how to process his feelings properly. No one ever taught them. And so they build this whole narcissistic personality around it to protect themselves from feeling this unresolved childhood pain. That's what it is. A boy that never grew up inside who didn't know how to feel an emotion. That's pretty much what it is. And so once you learn this, you know, hopefully this will help you with the holidays. And we can talk about this. I'll put this video up, and if you want to make some comments or DM me even, that's fine.